Some traditions look ancient because nobody bothered to check the receipt. Olympic flames, wedding flowers, sushi, kilts, Santa, even ancient wisdom cookies. A shocking number of them are basically modern inventions wearing fake historical mustaches. Here are 33 ancient traditions that are way younger, weirder, and more suspicious than they want you to know. 1. The Olympic torch. Relay looks like it should come with marble columns, dramatic chanting, and a Greek guy named Philonikos sprinting across a mountain while Zeus checks the lighting. But the famous relay from Olympia to the host city was not an ancient Olympic tradition. It was created for the 1936 Berlin Olympics, which means one of the most timeless Olympic rituals, was basically born as a propaganda spectacle with better branding than most modern product launches. Ancient Greeks did use sacred flames, sure, but nobody was organizing a continent-wide torch delivery system like history's most dramatic courier service. The whole point was to make the modern Olympics look directly connected to ancient glory. And honestly, it worked. Today we see the torch and think human unity. Its origin story says, marketing department, but make it mythological. 2. Tossing the bridal bouquet sounds cute, romantic, and safe, like a floral mini-game for single friends who came for champagne and emotional damage. But earlier wedding customs were much more chaotic. In parts of Europe, guests believed getting a piece of the bride's clothing brought good luck, so the bride could literally end up being chased by a crowd trying to rip pieces from her dress. Imagine paying for a beautiful gown just so Aunt Margaret can sprint at you like a medieval linebacker yelling, "I need the left sleeve for fertility." Throwing the bouquet became a convenient distraction. The bride launched the flowers, the mob focused on the airborne plant, and she escaped with her outfit still mostly attached. So yes, the bouquet toss is romantic, but it is also historical crowd control technology with petals. 3. Salmon sushi feels so naturally Japanese that people assume samurai were eating it after sword practice, quietly judging the rice texture. But raw salmon in sushi was not a deep, ancient Japanese tradition. For a long time, Japanese consumers were cautious about Pacific salmon because of parasite risks, and salmon was not treated like the glossy superstar it is today. Then Norway showed up in the 1980s with a very specific national problem. Too much farmed Atlantic salmon and not enough people buying it. Norwegian marketers pushed hard to convince Japan that their cold water salmon was clean, fatty, safe, and perfect for sushi. And they won. That orange slice on your nigiri is not timeless culinary heritage from a mountain monastery. It is Norwegian seafood diplomacy wearing wasabi and pretending it has been here forever. 4. Voodoo dolls are one of those pop culture objects people think they understand, because movies showed a villain stabbing a tiny doll while whispering like rent was due. But the famous pin-stabbing doll has very little to do with real Haitian voodoo or West African religious traditions. Voodoo is a rich, serious spiritual system with ceremonies, music, healing, community, ancestors, and spirits. The creepy tourist doll version is more of a mashup. New Orleans folklore, European witchcraft puppets, sensational newspapers, stage magic vibes, and Hollywood desperately needing one object that screams, "Someone is about to be cursed in Act 2." By the early 20th century, these dolls became convenient souvenirs for outsiders who wanted mystery without context. So the ancient voodoo doll is mostly spiritual clickbait before Wi-Fi existed. Tiny, spooky, and extremely misrepresented. 5. The Scottish kilt seems ancient enough to have been personally approved by a foggy mountain, 3 bagpipers, and a very angry sheep. But the tailored short kilt most people imagine is not some untouched relic from the dawn of Highland culture. Highlanders did wear large belted plaids for centuries, which were basically clothing, blanket, raincoat, and portable drama blanket all in one. The shorter kilt became associated with the 18th century, including industrial use, where giant flowing fabric around machinery was a terrible idea unless your hobby was becoming a workplace safety poster. Then the 19th century arrived with romantic novels, royal tourism, clan tartan marketing, and a national identity glow-up. Suddenly, tartan was everywhere, and everyone had a pattern. The ancient kilt is part tradition, part practicality, and part Victorian branding wearing wool. 6. Halloween. Trick-or-treating feels ancient because Halloween itself has deep roots in older seasonal customs, Christian observances, and Celtic traditions. But the American version, where children march door to door demanding candy like tiny masked tax collectors, is surprisingly modern. It really spread in the United States in the 1930s and 1940s. And one major reason was not magic, it was vandalism. Halloween used to be a prime night for pranks, broken windows, stolen gates, tipped outhouses, and general neighborhood terrorism performed by teenagers with too much energy and no internet. Communities realized candy was cheaper than repairs. So trick-or-treating became a peace treaty. Adults provide sugar, children do not redecorate the town with chaos. Basically, civilization looked at Halloween destruction and said, "What if we bribe the monsters?" 7. Diamond engagement rings are sold like love itself crawled out of the earth under extreme geological pressure, sparkling with destiny and monthly payments. But the modern idea that a proper proposal requires a diamond was heavily manufactured. Rings existed before, and wealthy people sometimes used diamonds. But the mass expectation exploded in the 20th century thanks to De Beers marketing. The slogan, "A diamond is forever," did not just sell jewelry. It sold permanence, status, guilt, romance, and the terrifying possibility that your entire relationship could be judged by a stone smaller than a pea. Before this marketing machine, plenty of couples got engaged without needing a mineral hostage on a finger. De Beers basically looked at human love and said, "Beautiful, but what if we made everyone panic about carrots?" 8. Ciabatta looks like it was baked by a Roman grandmother who learned bread making from a senator's cousin during a moonlit olive harvest. It has flour dust, rustic cracks, and enough ancient village energy to make people whisper while buying sandwiches. But ciabatta is not ancient. It was invented in Italy in 1982. Yes, 1982. The same general era as big hair, synthesizers, and people making questionable decisions with shoulder pads. Italian bakers created it partly to compete with the French baguette, which was becoming dangerously popular. For Italy, that was basically a carbohydrate emergency. The name means slipper because apparently someone looked at a flat loaf and thought, "Delicious footwear." So ciabatta is not a Roman relic. It is modern bread with an old soul and excellent public relations. 9. Tarot cards are often sold as ancient Egyptian wisdom, lost temple magic, or cosmic software for people with candles and dramatic tablecloths. But tarot did not begin as a mystical oracle. It began as a card game in Renaissance Europe. For centuries, people used tarot decks to play games, not to ask whether someone's emotionally unavailable ex was going to return during Mercury retrograde. The occult reputation came much later, especially in the late 18th century, when writers began attaching Egyptian symbolism, secret teachings, astrology, and mystical interpretation to the cards. Suddenly, a game night object got promoted to spiritual life coach. That does not mean modern tarot has no symbolic or personal value. But the ancient magical tool branding is very suspicious. Tarot went from cards on a table to prophecy with better lighting. 10. Throwing rice at weddings sounds gentle, symbolic, and only mildly annoying for whoever has to clean the church steps. But older British and Anglo-Saxon wedding customs could be much weirder. In some traditions, guests threw shoes at the couple. Actual shoes, not metaphorical shoes. Footwear. Because apparently wishing newlyweds fertility and good fortune required launching used leather at them like the reception had briefly become a sports event. Shoes were connected to luck, authority, fertility, and household transfer because old customs had a gift for making every normal life moment confusing. Rice, grain, and later confetti were softer, cleaner, and much less likely to give the groom a concussion before the cake was served. Humanity did not become sophisticated overnight. We just gradually replaced flying shoes with smaller, less humiliating projectiles. 11. Traditional Chinese medicine is often presented as one perfectly preserved ancient system, passed down unchanged for thousands of years by wise masters who never had to attend a government meeting. The reality is more complicated. China absolutely has a very long history of medical theories, herbal practices, acupuncture, pulse reading, massage, and regional healing traditions. But the modern standardized system known globally as traditional Chinese medicine was heavily organized, edited, and promoted in the 20th century, especially under Mao Zedong's government after 1949. China had a massive shortage of modern doctors, so older practices were gathered, systematized, simplified, and turned into a teachable national framework. Ancient roots, yes, but also modern bureaucracy, textbooks, committees, and political necessity. Even timeless wisdom sometimes needs a filing cabinet and a 5-year plan. 12. Swiss fondue feels like an eternal alpine ritual, invented when the first shepherd looked at cheese and thought, what if this became socially mandatory lava? But fondue's rise as Switzerland's national dish was boosted massively in the 20th century by cheese marketing. The Swiss Cheese Union pushed fondue hard because Switzerland had cheese to sell, and apparently the solution was to convince everyone that melting large quantities of it in a pot was patriotic. To be fair, this is one of the more delicious propaganda campaigns in history. No one is storming out because of too much melted cheese. Fondue existed before, but its national dish status was carefully promoted through recipes, advertising, and identity building. So when people gather around fondue today, they are enjoying tradition, yes. They are also participating in a very successful dairy sales strategy. 13. St. Patrick's Day. Parades feel so Irish that you expect them to have emerged fully formed from a green hill while a fiddle played in the background. But the big parade tradition was largely shaped in America by Irish immigrants. In the colonies and later the United States, Irish soldiers and immigrant communities used St. Patrick's Day processions to show pride, unity, and political strength. It was not just, let's wear green and enjoy ourselves. It was more like, there are many of us, we matter. And yes, local politicians, please notice the size of this crowd. Back in Ireland, the holiday was historically more religious and far less like a street festival with brass bands, novelty hats, and public beverage enthusiasm. One of the most famous Irish traditions is also an immigrant power move with excellent parade logistics. 14. The marathon sounds ancient because the story is perfect. A Greek messenger runs from Marathon to Athens, announces victory, collapses, and accidentally invents every runner's future personality. But the marathon race was not an ancient Olympic event. It was created for the first modern Olympic Games in Athens in 1896, inspired by the legendary run of Pheidippides. Even the modern distance was not fixed at first. The famous 26 miles and 385 yards came from later Olympic history, especially the 1908 London Games, where royal convenience and route planning helped create a distance that future runners would curse with great emotional detail. So no, ancient Greeks were not lining up for official marathons with hydration stations. The marathon is a modern tribute to an ancient legend, plus a reminder that humans will turn any story into organized suffering. 15. White wedding dresses are often explained as an ancient symbol of purity, because apparently every bridal custom needs a moral lecture sewn into the hem. But the white wedding dress became truly fashionable after Queen Victoria married Prince Albert in 1840 wearing white. Her choice was not mainly about purity. It was about style, status, and showing off beautiful Honiton lace, which supported British craftsmanship and also made her look expensive in a very royal, this was definitely not rented way. Before Victoria, brides often wore their best dress, whatever color it happened to be. White was impractical, difficult to keep clean, and basically announced that you were rich enough to treat stains like a philosophical concept. The purity symbolism became louder later. At first, it was fashion, lace, and royal influence causing a global copycat moment. 16. As American as apple pie sounds so patriotic that the pie should come with a tiny flag and a bald eagle guarding the crust. But apple pie is not originally American in the way the phrase suggests. Sweet apples came to North America with European colonists, and apple pie recipes had existed in Europe long before the United States had a constitution, a national anthem, or strong opinions about barbecue sauce. North America did have crab apples, but those were not exactly screaming, "Please bake me into Grandma's masterpiece." Apple pie became tied to American identity much later, especially in the 20th century through advertising, nostalgia, wartime language, and the emotional power of comfort food. So apple pie is American the way many American things are American. Imported, adapted, sweetened, marketed, and then defended like sacred national property. 17. The British royal balcony wave feels ancient, like medieval kings were stepping out above the peasants to perform delicate wrist movements and avoid normal conversations. But the Buckingham Palace balcony tradition is much more modern. Queen Victoria helped popularize royal balcony appearances in the 19th century, at a time when monarchy needed to seem visible, family-oriented, and connected to the public without becoming, too reachable. The balcony is perfect royal architecture, close enough for people to feel included, far enough away that nobody can ask uncomfortable questions about taxes, scandals, or why everyone owns so many hats. Over time, it became the stage for coronations, jubilees, weddings, and choreographed family unity. That little wave is not ancient ritual. It is public relations with columns, curtains, and terrifyingly controlled elbows. 18. Santa's red suit is often treated like ancient Christmas law, as if a council of elves once carved red velvet only into a sacred gingerbread tablet. Coca-Cola did not invent Santa Claus, and red versions of Santa existed before the company's ads. But in the 1930s, Coca-Cola's artist Haddon Sundblom helped standardize the modern Santa. Plump, cheerful, white-bearded, red-suited, and emotionally prepared to sell happiness through carbonated sugar. Before that, Santa's appearance was much less fixed. He could be thinner, sterner, more elf-like, more bishop-like, or dressed in different colors. Coca-Cola did what giant brands do best, took a messy folk image and turned it into the default setting. Modern Santa is not fake, but he is folklore after an extremely successful corporate makeover. Ho ho ho, sponsored by branding. 19. Bushido, the ancient samurai code, is usually described like every samurai walked around with a neat moral handbook titled Honor, Loyalty, and Dramatic Death for Beginners. Real samurai did have ethical ideas, military expectations, household rules, and concepts of loyalty. But Bushido, as one clean, unified, timeless code, was heavily romanticized in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Inazo Nitobe's book Bushido, The Soul of Japan, published in 1900, was written in English for Western readers and played a huge role in shaping the global idea of Bushido. It presented samurai values in a polished, noble, almost knightly way. The real samurai world was messier, full of politics, ambition, betrayals, practical decisions, and people behaving like people. History rarely comes with a perfect moral instruction manual, especially one carrying two swords. 20. Plowman's lunch sounds like an ancient British farm meal eaten by a sturdy worker named Arthur, who has dirt on his boots, bread in his hand, and very specific opinions about rain. The plate usually includes bread, cheese, pickle, maybe onion, and sometimes cold meat. Very rustic, very old world, very my lunch has heritage. But the pub version under that famous name was heavily promoted in the 20th century, especially by cheese marketing groups trying to sell more cheese. Calling it a cheese plate would have sounded ordinary. Calling it Plowman's lunch made it feel like you were biting into rural tradition itself. Bread and cheese were certainly old foods for working people, but the branded pub classic was marketing in a flat cap. Britain did not just serve cheese. It gave cheese a backstory and a shovel. 21. Russian Matrioska dolls look like ancient Slavic magic, as if they were found in a snowy village next to a samovar, a grandmother, and a song about longing. But the famous nesting doll is not ancient. The first Russian Matryoshka appeared in the 1890s, designed by Sergei Malyutin and carved by Vasily Zvyozdotchkin. It emerged during a period when Russian artists and patrons were actively reviving and reinventing folk styles for modern audiences. The inspiration may have included Japanese nesting figures, although the exact influence is debated. Either way, Matrioska dolls became popular incredibly fast, especially through exhibitions and tourism. They feel timeless because they are simple, charming, symbolic, and excellent at hiding smaller versions of themselves like a wooden family secret. Ancient Slavic relic? Not really. Brilliant modern folk branding? Absolutely. 22. Green leprechauns now feel so obvious that a red leprechaun sounds like a printing error. Tiny man, green coat, hat, shamrocks, gold, suspicious financial secrecy. Done. But older Irish folklore did not lock leprechauns into green. In many 19th century descriptions, leprechauns were often shown wearing red. The green makeover came later through the broader association of Ireland with green, St. Patrick's Day imagery, Irish nationalism, American celebration culture, and the modern need to color-code culture so nobody gets confused in the party store. Once Ireland became globally packaged as green, the leprechaun was basically handed a new uniform and told to stop asking questions. The result is now so familiar that people assume it must be ancient. This is how tradition often works. Change the outfit, repeat it long enough, sell it on a mug. 23. The rugby haka performed by New Zealand's All Blacks feels ancient, raw, and terrifying, like a war cry teleported directly from the past onto a sports field. The cultural roots are absolutely real. Haka are important Maori performance traditions with deep meaning, history, and community power. But the rugby version most global audiences know is also shaped by modern sport, staging, television, team identity, and careful cultural work. The All Blacks performed ka mete for many years, while Kapa Opango was created specifically for the team in 2005. The sharp synchronization and broadcast-ready intensity have developed over time. So it is not fake, but it is not frozen in a museum either. It is living culture. And living culture changes, adapts, trains, performs, and sometimes makes the opposing team look like they suddenly regret having legs. 24. High tea sounds fancy because the word high tricks people. You hear it and imagine aristocrats nibbling tiny sandwiches while silently destroying each other's reputations with eyebrow movements. But historically, high tea was not the delicate upper-class ritual many people imagine. That was afternoon tea, a lighter social event with refined snacks and social performance. High tea was much heartier and more working class, an evening meal after labor, often served at a higher dining table with tea, bread, meat, cheese, pies, and real food for people who had spent the day working instead of arranging lace napkins. So when luxury hotels sell high tea as a posh experience, they are basically giving factory supper a pearl necklace. Somewhere, a tired worker with a meat pie got upgraded into a duchess by the power of menu writing. 25. Stonehenge looks like it was built specifically for mysterious robed people to gather at sunrise and say things nobody fully understands. So the idea of ancient druid rituals there feels natural. But Stonehenge was built long before the historical druids we know from Iron Age Celtic societies. The connection between druids and Stonehenge became popular much later, through speculation by early antiquarians and then through romantic 18th and 19th century revival movements. Victorians and other enthusiasts loved mystery, costumes, secret orders, and anything that made Britain feel older, stranger, and more magical. So they helped attach druidic ceremonies to a monument whose builders were already ancient before the Druids entered the historical record. The modern solstice ritual vibe is powerful, but the ancient Druid Stonehenge tradition is mostly historical cosplay with excellent sunrise photography. 26. Kwanzaa is sometimes mistaken for an ancient African holiday that survived unchanged across centuries, quietly waiting for modern calendars to catch up. But Kwanzaa was created in the United States in 1966 by Maulana Karenga during the Black Freedom era. That does not make it less meaningful. It means it was deliberately designed. The holiday draws inspiration from African first fruits festivals and uses Swahili language, symbolism, candles, family gatherings, and 7 principles focused on unity, self-determination, collective work, cooperative economics, purpose, creativity, and faith. It was built to strengthen African American cultural identity and community connection. So Kwanzaa is not an ancient tradition accidentally found in a dusty box. It is a modern cultural creation with a clear mission. Some traditions are inherited. Others are consciously built because people need them. 27. Scottish bagpipes are so strongly tied to Scotland that if you hear them, your brain instantly generates mist, mountains, tartan, and one emotionally intense man staring into the distance. But bagpipes were not invented in Scotland. Bag-like reed instruments existed in different forms across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East long before the great Highland bagpipe became Scotland's loudest ambassador. Ancient and medieval societies had many versions of pipes powered by airbags, because apparently humanity collectively asked, how can we make a flute louder and harder to ignore? Scotland developed its own iconic form and gave it unmatched cultural power through Highland identity, military use, ceremonies, and national symbolism. So bagpipes are deeply Scottish now, but their origin is wider and older. Scotland did not invent the bagpipe. It weaponized its personality. 28. Corned beef and cabbage is treated in America like the ancient sacred meal of Ireland, probably blessed by St. Patrick himself between snake removal appointments. But in Ireland, the more common traditional meat for many people was pork or bacon, not beef. Beef was often expensive and tied to export markets. When Irish immigrants arrived in the United States, especially in cities like New York, corned beef was more accessible through urban markets and Jewish delis. Cabbage was cheap, filling, and dependable, which is exactly what immigrant families needed. Put them together, and a new Irish-American dish was born. It is not fake. It is adaptation, but it is not the ancient Irish farm meal many Americans imagine. It is immigrant history in a pot with enough salt to preserve both the beef and the national identity crisis. 29. Groundhog Day feels ancient because humans have always wanted animals to explain the weather, probably because animals cannot defend themselves in committee hearings. The famous American version, however, is a Pennsylvania tradition from the late 19th century. German-speaking immigrants brought Candlemas weather lore with them, where animals like badgers or bears were watched for signs of winter's end. In Pennsylvania, the groundhog got the job, perhaps because badgers were unavailable, bears were too dangerous, and groundhogs had the right mix of cuteness and unemployment. Punxsutawney Phil became the celebrity version, surrounded by top hats, speeches, cameras, and a level of ceremony usually reserved for heads of state or very dramatic cheese festivals. Phil is not famously accurate, but accuracy is not the point. Branding is, and the rodent has excellent branding. 30. Origami feels like an ancient discipline with strict rules handed down by silent masters. One square sheet, no cutting, no glue, no nonsense. And if your crane looks sad, that is your personal failure. But older Japanese paper folding traditions were not always so strict. Some paper crafts allowed cutting, pasting, or decorative additions. The modern pure origami ideal became much more standardized in the 20th century, especially through the work of Akira Yoshizawa, who helped elevate origami into a global art form and developed diagramming methods that made complex models teachable. The clean no scissors, no glue rule gave origami elegance, challenge, and international consistency. So while paper folding has old roots, the strict version many people treat as ancient law is modern. Even paper birds had to survive branding, standardization, and instruction diagrams. 31. The traditional Thanksgiving meal is often imagined as a perfect replay of 1621, with pilgrims and Wampanoag sitting down to turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, pumpkin pie, and probably one uncle saying something uncomfortable before dessert. But the real harvest gathering was not the modern menu wearing a buckle hat. It likely included wildfowl, venison, corn, and local foods. Potatoes were not yet a New England staple in the familiar Thanksgiving way. Cranberry sauce required sugar that was not casually available in festive quantities. Pumpkin pie in the modern form needed ingredients and baking conditions that made it unlikely. The holiday menu developed over centuries, especially in the 19th century, when writers and reformers helped shape Thanksgiving into a national tradition. The first Thanksgiving dinner was history. The modern plate is nostalgia with gravy. 32. Diamonds. As family heirlooms sound ancient and noble, like grandma's ring carries eternal love, sacred memory, and the quiet power to make everyone nervous at inheritance time. But the cultural pressure to keep diamonds forever was also extremely useful for the diamond industry. De Beers did not just sell diamonds as engagement rings, it sold the idea that diamonds were eternal, emotionally priceless, and almost morally wrong to resell. That is a genius business move. If families keep diamonds locked away as sacred sentimental objects, those stones do not return to the market and compete with newly sold diamonds. The heirloom story turns a gem into memory, loyalty, romance, guilt, and family politics all at once. Of course, inherited rings can be deeply meaningful. But the idea that selling one is somehow betrayal, that sparkle has a marketing department behind it. 33. Fortune cookies feel like ancient Chinese wisdom delivered in crunchy form after dinner, usually with lucky numbers and advice so vague it could apply to a monk, a dentist, or a raccoon going through personal growth. But fortune cookies are not an ancient Chinese tradition. They became popular in the United States, especially in California, and their origins are strongly linked to Japanese immigrant bakers and Japanese fortune cookie-like crackers from the late 19th and early 20th centuries. After World War II, they became increasingly associated with Chinese-American restaurants, partly because Japanese-American communities had been devastated by internment, while Chinese restaurant culture expanded. So the little folded cookie is not a message from ancient China. It is a Japanese-American Californian Chinese restaurant identity mashup. Basically, immigration history in dessert form with a tiny paper life coach inside. So now the real question is, which ancient tradition did we expose too gently, and which fake old custom deserves to be dragged into the comments like a scammer at a family reunion? Drop the one we missed, especially if people still defend it like sacred history. And if this video ruined at least one timeless tradition for you, hit like, subscribe, and join us for more history that clearly lied on its resume.